Hi friends, today I'm going to read a story called Alejandro's Gift by Richard Albert, illustrated by Sylvia Long. I picked it because it's about the environment, and we talked a little bit recently about taking care of the environment. It's also got really beautiful illustrations, and it's about friendship and loneliness also. I think it's a very nice story, especially because of the illustrations. So let's see what you think. So Alejandro lives in the desert. Isn't that a beautiful cactus? Alejandro's small adobe house stood beside a lonely desert road. Beside the house stood a well and a windmill to pump water from the well. Water for Alejandro and his only companion, a burro. It was a lonely place, and Alejandro welcomed any who stopped by to refresh themselves at the well. But visitors were few, and after they left, Alejandro felt lonelier than ever. To more easily endure the lonely hours, Alejandro planted a garden filled with carrots, beans, and large brown onions, tomatoes and corn, melons, squash, and small red peppers. Most mornings found Alejandro tending the garden, watching it grow. These were times he cherished, and he often stayed for hours, working until driven indoors by the desert heat. The days went by one after another with little change, until one morning when there was an unexpected visitor. This visitor came not from the desert road, but from the desert itself. I know some of you told me that you're growing gardens at your house, so I wonder if your garden looks like his garden. A ground squirrel crept up from the underbrush. Moving warily over the sand, it hesitated and looked around. Alejandro paused, keeping very quiet as the squirrel approached the garden. It ran up one of the furrows, drank its fill of water, and scampered away. After it left, Alejandro realized that for those few moments his loneliness had been all but forgotten. And because he felt less lonely, Alejandro found himself hoping the squirrel would come again. So I know you know that I love animals a lot, and I have to say that I never feel lonely when I have my animals with me, so I can understand how he feels. And do you see the ground squirrel right there? The squirrel did come again, from time to time bringing along small friends, wood rats and pocket gophers, jackrabbits, kangaroo rats, pocket mice. Birds, too, became aware of Alejandro's garden. Roadrunners, Gila woodpeckers, thrashers, cactus wrens, sage sparrows, mourning doves, and others came in the evening to perch on the branches of the mesquite bush, or to rest on the arms of a lone saguaro, which is that giant cactus I just showed you, before dropping down for a quick drink before nightfall. Occasionally, even an old desert tortoise could be seen plodding toward the garden. Think about a desert. They're really pretty, but they are very hot, and there's not a lot of water. And if you're an animal that lives in one, it's very hard to find what you need. And so now this garden is like an oasis. So they can come and get water and food, and they can keep him company. Suddenly, Alejandro found that time was passing more quickly. He was rarely lonely. He only had to look up from his hoe or from wherever he might be at any moment to find a small friend nearby. For a while, this was all that mattered to Alejandro, but after a time he wasn't so sure. He began asking himself if there was something more important than just making himself less lonely. It took Alejandro little time to see there was. He began to realize that his tiny desert friends came to his garden not for company, but for water. And he found himself thinking of the other animals in the desert. So recently when we read the story about the whale, we talked about how it was important to protect the ocean. Here he lives in the desert, which is a totally different environment. He can also help the animals that live there by providing water for them. Because I guess I feel like we're all in this together, all the animals and the people, and we should help kind of take care of each other. Animals like the coyote and the desert gray fox, the bobcats, the skunks, the badgers, the long-nosed coyotes, the peccaries, sometimes called javelinas, the short-tempered wild pigs of the desert, the antlered mule deer, the does, and the fawns. Finding enough water was not a problem. With his windmill and well, Alejandro could supply ample water for any and all. Getting it to those who needed it was something else. The something else Alejandro decided was a desert water hole. So look at all those animals. So that's cool. He's going to make a water hole for the desert. I like that. Without delay, Alejandro started digging. It was tiring work, taking many days in the hot desert sun. But the thought of giving water to so many thirsty desert dwellers more than made up for the drudgery. And when it was filled, Alejandro was pleased with the gift he had made for his desert friends. There was good reason to suppose it would take time for the larger animals to discover their new source of water. So Alejandro was patient. He went about it as usual, feeding his burro, tending the garden, and doing countless other chores. Days passed and nothing happened. Still, Alejandro was confident. But the days turned to weeks, and it was still quiet at the water hole. Why, Alejandro wondered, weren't they coming? What could he have done wrong? I wonder what's going to happen. The absence of the desert folk might have remained a mystery had Alejandro not come out of the house one morning when a skunk was in the clearing beyond the water hole. Seeing Alejandro, the skunk darted to safety in the underbrush. It suddenly became very clear why Alejandro's gift was being shunned. Alejandro couldn't believe he'd been so thoughtless, but what was important now was to put things right as quickly as possible. I wonder what the problem is. Water hole number 2 was built far from the house and screened by heavy desert growth. When it was filled and ready, Alejandro waited with mixed emotions. He was hopeful, yet he couldn't forget what had happened the first time. As it turned out, he was not disappointed. So, without thinking, he put the water hole close to his house and his garden, which I'm sure some animals might come, but think about it. These are wild animals. They want to make sure they're safe. So if he puts it a little farther from the house and makes sure there's a lot of native plants that they can hide and use as a screen to protect themselves, they're more likely to come and drink the water. So here he is making his second one. The animals of the desert did come, each as it made its own discovery. Because the water hole was now sheltered from the small adobe house in the desert road, the animals were no longer fearful. And although Alejandro could not see through the desert growth surrounding the water hole, he had ways of knowing it was no longer being shunned. By the twitter of birds gathering in the dust, by the rustling of mesquite in the quiet desert evening telling of the approach of a coyote, a badger, or maybe a desert fox, by the soft hoofbeats of a mule deer, or the unmistakable sound of a herd of peccaries charging toward the water hole. So now it looks like a more natural environment, so they're more likely to come. And in those moments when Alejandro sat quietly listening to the sounds of the desert neighbors, he knew that the gift was not so much a gift that he had given, but a gift that he had received. So it's just like you. If you do something for somebody else, it makes you feel good, right? So he put the water hole out for the animals. Of course, it's really wonderful for them because it's life-saving, but it's also a gift for him to see how much they're enjoying it and how much he's been able to give to their lives. And so the back of the book, it talks about all different kinds of animals that live in the desert, if you want more information about that. So my mom used to live in the desert. She used to live in Tucson, Arizona, and a lot of these animals in the story are animals that were in her neighborhood. And they had a swimming pool, and so sometimes some of these animals would even climb over the fence and come down and drink from her swimming pool because they were so desperate for water. And there's a view of the environment like a sunset. Isn't it pretty? Well, this book is a lot different from some of the ones I've read this year, but I just think it's a beautiful book, and I just think taking care of the environment is very important. And it's not just about pollution, and it's not just about just being mindful of the things that you throw away. It's also about what you can do to help other animals that share our planet. And so this is what he did by building a water hole. I hope you enjoyed the story, friends. Happy reading.